take questions. Because of the epidemic, please keep your mask on and maintain social distancing. Chief Executive, please. Media friends and members of the public, good morning. This morning, together with the Secretary for Labour and Welfare and the head of PICO, we will talk about the latest progress of the two measures to support employment. They are the temporary unemployment relief under the sixth round of the anti-epidemic fund. The other measure is the new round of the employment support scheme, that is the 2022 ESS. Concerning the temporary unemployment relief, we have begun accepting application on the 23rd of March. 3 weeks, that is the application period, will close by midnight the 12th of April. So there are only a few days left. So please apply for it if you need to. Later on, the head of PICO will update you on the progress on that. The other measure is the new round of the ESS. The previous round was in year 2020. In year 2022, in view of the serious situation of the fifth wave, I decided to roll out another round of ESS. On the 18th of March, together with two other colleagues, I have announced the framework of the 2022 ESS. I stressed at the time that it was the preliminary framework. We would consult the stakeholders in the meantime to find out the necessary revision needed for the new round of ESS. After the, as approved by the chairman of the Finance Committee, Mr. Chan Kin-po, a special Finance Committee meeting will be held on the 12th of April to discuss the funding required for the 2022 ESS. After consulting the stakeholders, we would like to brief you on the final version of the 2022 ESS. We would call it an enhanced version. For all the suggestions and improvements, we have taken on board these views. Since the announcements are on the 18th of March, we have started the consultation. Views were received from Legislative Council members and also trade representatives. I chaired a virtual meeting online on the 25th of March. More than 100 trade representatives were present. We have received views mainly from 6 aspects. The enhanced ESS would incorporate the 6 areas of improvement. First, there are views that we should relax or abolish the $30,000 monthly wage limit for eligible employees. Employees with wage no more than $30,000 would be eligible for the ESS. Back in the 2020 ESS plan, there was no maximum wage limit. Because of the seriousness of the epidemic, as well as the situation of SMEs, as well as INT startups, these industries hire fewer employees with higher wages. For example, employees working in cyberports and so on. So we agree with the views, and there will be no maximum wage limit for eligible applicants under the new scheme. Second, there are views that we should not make it mandatory to base the number of eligible employees, or the limit of or the maximum number of eligible employees based on the data submitted in the 2020 ESS. In the past year, we have encountered enormous changes in our economy. In year 2021, our economy rebounded, and the GDP climbed by more than 6%. Some businesses even expanded during the year. If we use the base back in 2020, it may be an underestimation. So we would allow the employers to choose. Employer can choose to use the number of employees back in the 2020 ESS scheme as the maximum number of employees. Employer can also choose to use the actual number of employees hired in the fourth quarter of year 2021 as the maximum number of eligible applicants. The third view is that we should not set a cap on the number of employees, the number of applications made under the scheme. There are corporations hiring as many as 10,000 employees. That's why back in the 2020 ESS, subsidies were offered to more than 10,000 employees. So we think under the 2022 ESS, we should set a limit for the number of applications made by a company. There are views that we should not set a limit. However, we cannot accept the view entirely, because we want to be focused in offering help to employees. We should set a limit. However, we can relax the limit. So the maximum number will be set at 1,000. In other words, large corporations can apply ESS for as many as 1,000 employees. The fourth view is about the exemption or excluded list for trades which were not affected. For example, construction, logistics, delivery, or pharmacies. For businesses employing fewer than 50 employees, they would be eligible. For those employing more than 50 employees, they would not be eligible. We have received a lot of views concerning this point. We were criticized of being harsh. After taking in the views, we would enhance the requirements by dispensing with the excluded list. Previously, if you are on the excluded list, you would not be eligible. This time, we have the restricted list. Those on the restricted list will be eligible. However, there will be a cap of 100 applications. For SMEs hiring fewer than 100 employees, of course, they can apply subsidies under the ESS for all their employees. So we have consulted the affected trades concerning the restricted list. As a result, we would make a very fine distinction between the different industries, for example, construction industry.
And number 5, there are people who are not on full-time payroll. They are part-time workers. They are casual workers. So in this ESS enhanced version, we also cover quota, and many of them do not earn as much as $8,000. They're not eligible at all. But with the half rate, they would be eligible. Let's say they are earning anything between $3,000 and $8,000 on a part-time basis, they would be eligible, although the subsidy would be half the rate, i.e. $4,000. Of course, this would include the temporary staff under the MPF scheme. The last recommendation is to cover the self-employed people and those above the age of 65. Those self-employed people with an MPF account and those above the age of 65 who still have an MPF account, they should still be eligible for these 2022 ESS. So we have been proactively responding to views and aspirations put forward by LegCo and the trades. I mentioned an example about the ceiling on the number of employees. Now let's say there is an F&B enterprise. In 2020 ESS, the total number of employees stood at 200, but in 2021 the economy has come back and we have the consumption voucher scheme and we have registered 0 COVID cases, and this enterprise expanded the business. So prior to the 5th wave in October, November, and December, this enterprise has expanded its business, and it has hired 1,500 or 1,200 people. But with the arrival of the 5th wave and also the social distancing measures, the number of the headcount has to be slashed. So under the 5th wave, the headcount is back down to 800. And on the 21st of this month, we are rolling out the relaxation in 3 phases, and nighttime dining would be back, and he would stand to benefit from that. So he can keep the 800 headcount by June, July. With the consumption voucher, the headcount may be increased to 1,000. So in this 2022 ESS enhanced scheme, the subsidy would be on the basis of 800 in May, 1,000 in June, and 1,000 in July. So on the basis of the 2020, the 800 cap, he will not be able to apply for so much. But if we allow the headcount of 1,200, that's the Q4 headcount prior to the 5th wave, then these enterprises can apply for the subsidy for the months of May to July. I hasten to add that we're not using the 2020 data, and we are using the actual Q4 data. It would take a little bit longer for processing because we have to go back to the trustees of the MPF to get hold of all the relevant documentation. So it would be a little bit longer in terms of processing time for this kind of scenario. So for those who opt for the actual headcount on the basis of Q4, it would take a little bit longer for the money to be dispersed by something like 4 weeks. It's a question of time. The money will be dispersed on the basis of this enhanced scheme, but they have to be mentally prepared that it would take a little bit longer than usual. As I said, we have listened to a lot of good views and revised the list. Basically, the exclusion list would be similar to 2020. Now, for hotels that have become isolation facility, they will not be eligible. And we have introduced this restricted list, or what we call the exclusion list, on the 18th of March. Now, all the employers in the restricted list can make the application, albeit up to 100 employees. If they are SMEs, the headcount is below 100, then all the employees would come under this 2022 enhancement scheme. I'm not going to go into minute detail about each and every one. You might notice those in red, like for the medical sector. Last time we put clinics there. The clinics were in the exclusion list last time, unless they have headcount of less than 50. Now we are for the large medical organizations with a lot of labs and clinics. The second one, a lot of submissions are arguing the case for the construction sector. The construction trade employers were excluded last time, and the Development Bureau had discussions with the trade and the construction trade in the restricted list cover the main contractors, but it doesn't include the subcontractors or the RMAA subcontractors. So for these RMAA and subcontractors, they will fall into the third list. They can make application under this scheme, and they can apply for up to a headcount of 1,000. So this is the enhancement measure that we have put in place on this scheme. I'm sure that this would go down well among the sectors. We've done so much, the number of beneficiaries would increase, and the financial commitment would also increase as a result. And number of employers stands at about 160,000, but for employees, including self-employed, those above 65 and part-time workers, and the headcount going up from 50 to 100. So instead of 1.3 million employees, the number of beneficiaries would go up to 1.74 million. Financial commitment, instead of $31 billion, will go up to $39 billion, including the contingency of 10%. So next Tuesday, when we go to the Finance Committee for injection into the AEF to implement this 2022 ESS, the funding proposal would be coming to 4.3 of $43 billion. And I hope that members would be supportive of this. I defer to Ms. Doris Ho to talk further about this, and then Dr. Law will talk about the rights and benefits of the workers during the pandemic.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Now I would like to talk about the Temporary Unemployment Relief Scheme. Now, the application period lasts for 3 weeks, starting the 23rd of March. As at the 6th of April, 17 days have passed. During the past 17 days, we have received more than 360,000 applications. Media friends have asked the question that considering the number of applications, what is the proportion of application with and without MPF accounts? During the initial period, the split was 70% to 70 to 30. That is, 70% of the applications were MPF accounts holder. Now, in the past few days, it has become 60-40. So 60 with MPF accounts, 40% without MPF accounts. We accept applications from two kinds of applicants. That is, those who were unemployed for at least 30 days at the time of application. And also we accept applications from employees employed by scheduled premises under the 599F, including gyms and salons and so on. If you are put on no paid leave by your employer, you will also be eligible. So the split is 70 and 30. So 70% of the applicants are unemployed people, and 30% of the applicants are employees under the restricted premises. Since the 23rd of March, we have been dealing with the applications so as to release the relief as soon as possible. Our agent has completed the vetting procedure for the first batch of applications. There are about 60,000 eligible or applicants or qualified applicants. Tomorrow, on Friday, this batch of applicants will receive SMS and emails notification. And in a week starting next Tuesday, that is the 12th of April, the relief amounts would be automatically transferred to the applicant's bank account from the Treasury. So I mentioned that there were 60,000 valid applications. Most of them are MPF account holders. As we have mentioned before, for non-MPF account holders, more supporting documents will be required, and the two agents would need more time to vet the applications. The two agents are working at full speed to process the applications. If applicants want to learn about the progress of the application, I recommend that starting tomorrow, the 8th of April, the applicants can log onto the thematic website. There is a tab called check your results, and then you can find out about the progress of your application. So among the 60,000 valid applications, for in other words, there are also uneligible or invalid applications. For every 10 applications with MPF accounts, 7 would be valid and 3 would be uneligible. So there are two criteria. First, in the fourth quarter last year, that is the months between October and December, the applicants must have been employed at least for a month, and the wage must be between $2,700 to $30,000. And also, some employees would be from restricted a business on restricted premises. Some ineligible applicants were not able to fulfill the criteria. For example, the wage is lower than $2,700 or higher than $30,000. Some employees were put on unpaid leave. However, we are restricting those applicants to employees from businesses on the scheduled premises. For example, gyms and catering businesses, because we impose the dining ban in the evening. Some applicants put forward the ground of unpaid leave. However, they are not employees from these scheduled premises, so they are also ineligible. So like the chief executive said, the application period is going to close soon. There are only 6 days left, so I would like to remind the public we have 5 service centers. In the coming 4 days, the service centers will have their operation hours extended. It seems that the booking is already quite full already. So I encourage those who have yet to apply for the relief, do so promptly, and also you can call our hotline. We are closely monitoring the usage of the hotline. During the first 3 days after the application period began, the demand for the hotline was high, and then we received fewer calls. We have a lot of spare capacity to take in calls from applicants who are not able to register online. On the other hand, it is not that difficult to apply online because some 340,000 applicants made the application online. So you don't have to come to our service centers. If you need help, you can call our hotline, and also you can watch the video clip on our website. The video clip will take you through the process step by step. So thank you. Dr. Law. Thank you, Chief Executive. Recently, many trade unions receive call for assistance from their members. That the employees did not get a paid leave because of isolation or quarantine. There are some something not clear about the requirements for isolation and quarantine. That's why we amended we are amending the employment ordinance, and the bills committees will have the second meeting this afternoon. So I urge members of the Legislative Council can complete scrutiny of the bill so that we can have second and third reading of the bill. I would like to remind employers, if employees are required to undergo isolation because of infection of COVID, the employers have to provide a paid leave to employees under the employment ordinance. Otherwise, they would be in breach of the law and they would be prosecuted. There are clear requirements for paid annual leave under the employment ordinance. The employer cannot arbitrarily offset the paid annual leave with other kind of leaves. It would be against the law if you breach this provision, and you may be liable to criminal prosecution. For employees undergoing isolation and quarantine who are not able to come back to work, there are some gray areas under the law. However, it doesn't mean that employers do not have to take up their responsibility. We don't want to take it to court, so we appeal to employers to show compassion and understanding to employee situation and adopt a more relaxed approach in dealing with the labor matters in relation to isolation and quarantine. And because of the seriousness of the epidemic, some businesses' operation was affected by isolation and quarantine, and also it drove up the operating cost. So the ESS aims at alleviating the employers of the cost. So I appeal to employers with the 2022 ESS, you should treat your employees even better. We should all stand united to rise above the epidemic and achieve an economic rebound. Thank you. We will now take questions. Please raise your hands and please identify your media organizations, and then please ask your questions with our mic.
頭先我左手邊前
The lady in the front row, please. Cable TV. Mrs. Lam, do you support Mr. John Lee in his bid to become the chief executive? Now, you said that in terms of youth and poverty, he didn't have a lot of exposure. Do you think he would be competent enough? Who is going to be the CS and who is going to be doing the CRC work? And do you think that there is any conflict of interest in terms of approving Mr. John Lee, do you think that the credibility will be undermined? And also the anti-epidemic service pack, some people will have to show their ID card to the volunteers when they go collect the service pack. You said, Chief Executive, last week that the government would be very liberal about it. What's the point of having the ID card recorded? Now, Lord Reid said that there is no political pressure when he resigned. Do you think that Lord Reid resigned because of political pressure? Well, a whole litany of questions. I'm going to try to address them in brief. I said already that for the 6th term Chief Executive, I am not going to comment on this. The only thing I have to make sure what happened is to make sure the election of the Chief Executive will be handled properly. The EAC and the REO will be responsible for that area of work. So I'm not going to address all these questions you raised in this regard. As regards the CS, he has tender resignation pending approval under BL 48.5. The Chief Executive's authority involves two areas regarding principal officials. First, the Chief Executive nominates and submits to the CPG for appointment. Second, the CE recommends to the CPG the removal of duties. So in accordance with Basic Law 48.5, I have already reported this to the CPG. Now, there are two areas there, as I said. As of today, we don't have any deputizing arrangement for the Chief Secretary for Administration. I have submitted the details to the CPG, and this will be considered. Of course, the CS has its own portfolio. Since the revamp of the electoral arrangement, we have the CERC, Candidate Eligibility Review Committee. It doesn't say anything about the CS being on chairing the committee. It is a principal official who will be appointed by me, no less than 2, no more than 4. I didn't come prepared for this question, so I don't have the details here. But it doesn't say that the CS will be the chairman of the CERC. And I have appointed a number of principal officials. I appointed the CS as the chairman of the CERC. I will be making the appointment later on to make sure that in this CERC, together with 3 unofficial members, it will be able to handle the work of the Chief Executive election. Last week, I've already announced that during the nomination period, there are certain social distancing measures like the 2 people group gathering ban and the close family mixing. There are some exemptions to make sure that election work will go ahead smoothly. It was the CS who approved of that. Under Cap 599, this authority to grant exemption has been given to the CS. As to the other questions, regarding the service centers, the 89 service centers that would distribute the service packs, there would be liberal treatment, but of course they would need certain information. I will have a word with the HAB as to why they need to seek the information that you mentioned. But definitely it's not to collect the information. It's just to make sure that the supplies will be handed into the hands of the relevant people. As regards the two UK judges who resigned, I've already put out a statement in response, and I don't have anything to add in this regard. All right, next, please. The lady on the far right, please.
From Bloomberg News. Due to the flight ban mechanism, more routes have been banned since April 1st. Earlier this week, over 70% of flights scheduled to land on a single day were canceled. This, in effect, has erased Hong Kong's easing of travel restrictions and made it very challenging for Hong Kong residents to return to the city. Yesterday, the Director General of the International Air Transport Association said that Hong Kong is essentially off the map now. So will the government review the flight ban mechanism again, including the strict criteria of 3 positive cases per flight? Or will a review need to wait until after the implementation of social distancing easing later this month? What is your response to business groups who say that the travel easing so far has not amounted to very much? And on John Lee entering the CE race, I know you don't want to comment on his candidacy, but what do you think the next chief executive's priorities should be? Should it be restoring Hong Kong's reputation as an international financial center or focusing on the security situation? And finally, after you publicly announced on Monday that you would not seek a second term as CE, Beijing still has yet to publicly respond. Have they communicated with you directly, and do you see the lack of their public response as a sign that they are dissatisfied with your performance in office? Do you personally have any regrets about your time as chief executive? Thank you.
First of all, there is no doubt that Hong Kong is a very important aviation hub. And actually, in the 14th five-year plan, through my strong request, the International Aviation Hub was written into the 14th five-year plan as one of the areas that the Central People's Government will strongly support Hong Kong. Previously, it only mentioned about transportation. But in the 14th five-year plan, we managed to get 2 specific references. One is to transportation, including maritime and other things. But the other is to an international aviation hub in anticipation of the completion of the 3rd runway system. So during my term, I've been doing all I could to support the development of the airport as well as the airport city. So the 5th wave of the COVID-19 epidemic has really hit us hard. And up till now, we are still adhering to the policies of preventing the importation of infected cases, and at the same time, through social distancing measures to reduce or avoid the spread of local infections. But that doesn't mean we will not continuously review the situation and make the necessary adjustments. I made the announcement on the 21st of March to lift the place-specific flight suspension in respect of the 9 countries, which have been imposed since January. And it is not right to say that this travel easing has no impact, because according to my data, since the 1st of April, on average, 1,000 or over 1,000 Hong Kong residents have returned. Prior to that, it was a daily average of 200. So many Hong Kong residents have made use of this lifting of the place-specific flight expansion and returned to Hong Kong. And so far, I have to thank the airport authority, the airlines, and all my colleagues to make this whole process as efficient, as smooth as possible for these returnees, right from landing at the airport to the test and hold for the PCR test, and then designated transport, taking them to the designated quarantine hotel, and allowing them to leave after day 6 and day 7 with a PCR negative, with the RAT negative test. So what we now discover since the 1st of April is probably because of the very relaxed approach adopted in many places. Some of the flights have brought back more than 3 or more cases upon arrival. And one has to ask if the requirement for pre-boarding is a PCR negative test. Is that really because of the circumstances that a negative test of a person turned positive after 10, 15 hours upon arrival? So we have to understand what has happened leading to these route-specific flight suspensions that we have to impose upon airlines under the current policy. So we will continue to review and to make the necessary adjustments in the light of the Hong Kong epidemic situation. I don't want to comment on the work of the next chief executive, except to repeat what I said on an earlier occasion, that every chief executive of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region should possess the quality to understand fully the dual accountability of the chief executive, which is very, very unique, that the chief executive has dual responsibility. He or she is responsible to the Central People's Government, but at the same time to the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. I also said on that occasion that the chief executive will need to have a very good grasp of this unique principle of one country, two systems, Hong Kong people administering Hong Kong, and a high degree of autonomy. And so whoever possesses these qualities, I'm sure will be able to do the job well. My decision not to seek a second term is my decision. So why do anybody have to make a public response on my decision? I welcome my friends, my supporters who send me messages that they did appreciate what I have done in my term, but there's no need for any official response from any government, including the Central People's Government. Thank you.
好，跟住係第三位嘅。
Next question, please. From my left, the lady in white. Good morning, TVB. Now about the ESS. Back in March, on the press briefing, you said it was just a preliminary plan. However, during the previous round, some corporations used the quota on high-earning employees. That's why you said you would set a limit on the wage. However, the wage cap is removed. So what's the reason why you are changing the plan like that? Are you worried that some corporations would use the same trick and select the high earners to apply for the ESS? Now, there is a maximum headcount of 1,000 employees. Some corporations hiring more than 1,000 employees, after getting subsidy for 1,000 employees, they may sack at the other employees. And also, last round, the media criticized that supermarkets and some well-doing businesses should not receive subsidy. Now, under this new round, these corporations will receive relief for 100 employees. So why don't we spend the resource more wisely? So I know you would not comment on Mr. John Lee, but what about Dr. Law? Now I will answer the question on ESS. So maybe we weren't clear enough. We want to prevent the situation back in the 2020 ESS. We don't want to offer. We don't want to skewer the relief towards high earners. So we would disperse the subsidy to the employer, and then the employer would be responsible for allocating the amount. There is a promised headcount. However, we do not require the employer to spend the specific amount on a certain employee. So for the 8,000 full subsidy and the half subsidy of $4,000 for part-time employees. We would check whether the employees get 5% of the get the 5% MPF contribution from the employers in the subsequent months. So it is in line with our announcement made on the 18th of March, because that is very important. The labor sector stresses that there should be no more manipulation by the employers concerning the ESS. So we will make sure that the $8,000 or $4,000 subsidy will reach the employees. Now we have dispensed with the $30,000 wage cap. Actually, we didn't have that for the previous round. If you earn $80,000 under the previous round, you can still apply. However, it would be the amount will be capped at $9,000. This time, there are many sectors, for example, INT and startups. Many of them are SMEs. They don't hire too many employees. However, because of the business nature, the employees are higher earner, for example, $40,000 or $50,000 per month. And also there are private schools and those in the tertiary industry, for example, education services and other services business. The employees also earn a higher wage. If we set a maximum wage of $30,000, then we may not be able to reach out to these businesses. So that's what we heard during the consultation. Some stakeholders call for raising the maximum wage to $40,000 or $50,000. Some called for the abolition of it. So after considering the views, we think it is acceptable to abolish the maximum wage. Every year we offer tax deductions. If you are a taxpayer under the salary tax, you will enjoy the tax concessions offered under the budget. But there is a cap, usually at $10,000 per case. So even if you pay a lot of tax, you can still enjoy the $10,000 tax concession. So the situation you mentioned was did not exist. For corporations hiring more than 1,000 employees, there are some of them. We have a list because last time it was open to everyone. We want to focus the resources on SMEs. And we don't think we should give full subsidy to mega corporations. For example, a major catering chain or franchise bus companies. It is not possible for us to subsidize all 5,000 or 6,000 employees. So we think the 1,000 maximum headcount is reasonable. I don't see why they would fire employees on top of that amount, because they still have to operate. Now, the exclusion list has become the restricted list. It's based on the same spirit. First of all, the businesses will still be able to benefit. And also, just like a tax concessions, everyone can benefit. It's just that there is a cap. On the exclusion list, pharmacies and supermarkets and so on, no matter their size, the headcounts would be limited at 100. So whether we should take a survey to see whether there are micro supermarkets on ground floor level hiring a few people, should we put them on the restricted list as well? Well, that's not very fair. Our businesses are very diverse. For the ESS, we aim at swift disbursements. It is impossible for us to look closely into how well they are doing. Are they making a profit, or have they been particularly hard hit under the fifth wave, except for the businesses which are asked to close under the 599F.
冇影響對於
So with this 100, it will not really affect the operation. Now we are increasing the funding to $43 billion. So we're seeking more funding to protect the SMEs, including those high-paid SMEs with a small headcount. I would not normally comment on the performance of any officials. The only thing I would comment on would be the policies, and this is the principle that I have abided by. As principal officials, we will not be commenting on my fellow colleagues. Let's take the last question. A lady in the middle row towards the front. Ms. Lam, HK Economic Journal. About the acting CS, you said that you have to submit the details to the CPG for consideration, but in light of the previous experience, like when you resigned, there was a acting official. Now, this time, why is the departure? Is it the case that you don't have any right and authority to decide? You don't want to comment on the CE election, but under your watch, the NSL has been introduced. We have removed all the Democrats. Do you think that you have paved the way for the next chief executive? Well, I'm not going to answer questions like this. That you talked about the acting CS arrangement. When the principal official cannot exercise the duty, there is an arrangement acting for administrative convenience. Under different circumstances, we would accept an acting arrangement for administrative convenience. And this is not governed by the Article 48.5 of the Basic Law. Now we're dealing with the post of the CS, and this is second in command. If I am not in the post, the CS would be deputizing the CE post. Now you mentioned that in the past, as soon as someone resigned, there is an acting arrangement. I think at this time it's more appropriate for us to deal with this in one go, and that's why this is being considered by the CPG. But please rest assured that in absence of the CS at the moment, the work will continue. That's all the time we have for today. See you tomorrow. Thank you all very much for coming.